I thought I was going to take the sexual assault and the eating disorder to my grave. I thought those two things were off the table. Close friends, therapists, like you name it, didn't tell anybody that kind of stuff. And only within the last 12 months that I've started to really learn forgiveness. I still have a lot to go with regards to addiction and stuff like that, but I'll say this now because it's pertinent. I've come to realize that all the time that I spent as an alcoholic, as a drug addict, an eating disorder, all the decisions that I made that were not the right decision at the time, I forgive myself for. Because you know what? I was doing the best that I could at the time. I was trying. I learned and thankfully made it through them. But also, I forgive myself for the other things like my mom passing away or the sexual assault because I didn't bring those things upon myself.
You just lost your loved one. Now what? Welcome to the Grief in Life podcast, where we explore this new reality through grief-colored lenses. Openly, authentically, I'm your host, Nina Rodriguez. Let's get started. On today's episode, we welcome Jonathan Niziol. He's a model real estate investor, trainer, athlete, public speaker, and a remarkable individual whose personal journey went from professional lacrosse player to battling addiction, to international modeling, to being sexually assaulted, and sober living after addiction. And all of these turns are a testament of his resilience. Today, we'll hear his story, which began on a tranquil Canadian farm. His life took a heart-wrenching turn when his dear mother unexpectedly passed just before his 21st birthday. And the ripple effect of that profound loss and grief impacted every part of his life, including struggling with addiction, life-threatening pancreatitis, an eating disorder, and ultimately his survival. These challenges were compounded by a sexual assault during a modeling job in Miami, experiencing grief following the death of 3 of his friends, as well as the weight of depression. 2017 marked the turning point when Jonathan decided to seek help in the form of therapy, helping him break free from addiction's grip after 16 and a half years. And today, Jonathan is thriving. I am honored to share his story with you. With that being said, welcome to the Grief in Life podcast, Jonathan.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you for having me.
I'm honored to have you. Let's start with your dear mother's name and anything you want our audience to know about who she was and take it from there.
Yeah, my mother's name was Glenda. She was the most wonderful person I've ever met in my life. My biggest fan, my biggest supporter, my best friend, all of those things. And yeah, unfortunately, she was taken away very suddenly the day before. It was the day right before my 21st birthday. I thought I was just getting a call from home talking about like, hey, we're going to do this for your birthday because in Canada, when you turn 19, that's when you're illegal to drink. But I was going to school in the States, so I missed my party birthday. And then when I was turned 21, I was back in Canada, so I missed my party birthday. So if we were going to make it kind of special and do something, and I thought I was just getting a call, just like, what are we going to do for my birthday? And then it was just, it was very tragic. It was sudden tragic. She wasn't sick or anything like that. It was just your mom's dead. And my life just, completely flipped from there. As you know, and as we just briefly talked about before we hit record, it does that. It flips everything. I mean, that's where it all started, but it's crazy.
I'm very sorry. I'm deeply sorry for that. I honor her with you with this beautiful message you ultimately have for the audience. And I resonate with the impact of that sudden, unexpected loss factor of it, because it literally just reminds you that life is here. You're here one day, gone tomorrow. And that abrupt end to her song, if you will, is so it just stays with you. It stays with you forever. Besides the fact that it was your mother, it just really stays with you. So your life took a turn after that, as understandably so. That's a profound loss that has a huge impact. So what happened after that?
So I always say that I was kind of keeping it together for a couple of years and sort of had it together. And then the wheels really started to fall off. I think things really started to set in. The reality of the situation really started to set in. There was a couple other family things that happened that I don't really get into too much, but I started to experience mental health struggles. And, this is 20 years ago, and mental health wasn't talked about then. I had never heard the words anxiety, depression, panic disorder, self-harm. I never had heard those things before. I just thought I was losing it. And right. I was I was showing it in a bunch of different ways and I thought I was going crazy. So I finally was diagnosed with having severe anxiety and clinical depression and panic disorder and self-harm and stuff like that, and started getting medicated. It helped a bit, but what I found really helped was drinking. And I mean, I say helped, but it really helped make the bad stuff go away for, a short period of, 15 to 30 beers at a time, whatever it was. And I partied in college. I liked the, party, but probably a bit too much in college, but I could still turn it off. And, it's that crutch. It became a want. And then I want to go out and have fun with my friends and have whatever, to a need. And I need to go home and get drunk by myself because I've got all this stuff going on in my head. And I quickly became a non-functioning alcoholic. And I remember the moment in which I realized I was an alcoholic, and it was 8:00 in the morning. I'd called in sick from work. I had the shakes because I was going through withdrawals. I was opening my first beer for the day, and I just sat there and I was like, that's it. I'm an alcoholic. This has got a hold of me. I know I need to stop. I had no idea how I was going to stop.
So just you had that aha moment, and because I heard some of your story before, and at one point you mentioned that you found yourself numbing your pain by yourself. So this wasn't like a social open event. It was just something that you look forward to, just disconnecting, disengaging, relaxing your nervous system with the aid of alcohol, but it was by yourself. Maybe that's when it dawned on you, right?
Yes, exactly. And a lot of it, there was still, especially with alcohol, there's still a lot of partying to be done. So I was playing professional lacrosse and after games and stuff, we'd all get together and party and stuff. But then I would continue it by myself. And there was a lot of times where there was no party to be had and it was just by myself. And absolutely, I was very insular in most of my addictions, in that, I just wanted to shut in. And I was fine when I was, fine, but I was okay when I was out and distracted or working or doing whatever. And it's when I had to be alone with myself and my thoughts and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, now I this is the part I can't handle. So
right.
Yeah. And that was the realization. And my whole life was falling apart around me. My health was failing and I was obese and 40% body fat. And my friendships and relationships were always on the fritz because of my addiction, my alcoholism. Financially, I was spending tons of money. I barely had hobbies, but drinking was just and I was not reliable. I pride myself on being somebody who's very reliable, and it took that away from me. So I could see my whole world crumbling around me. But again, it was my safe space. But I got very lucky because, like I said, I knew I was an alcoholic. I was a severe alcoholic, and I didn't know how I was going to stop. But luckily, when I was 25, I got a very severe case of acute pancreatitis. And to get the severity of pancreatitis that I had, the doctors told me this is what we see in somebody who's 70 and they've been drinking for 50 or 60 years. I was in the hospital for just under a month. I had to have 5 blood transfusions in that time. I lost 40 pounds in the first 2 weeks and then another 20 pounds, so 60 pounds in total. And I almost died twice. I don't remember the specific instances, and I just remember a lot of chaos and stuff like that. But when the doctor was giving me okay, you're getting ready to go home now speech, they said, okay, we're not kidding around here when we say that you almost died twice. And if you didn't get in here within 24 to 72 hours, you wouldn't have made it. So I got very lucky because that put an end to drinking for me. I remember laying alone in the hospital bed, and I've got IVs here, I've got a catheter, and I've got, tubes going up my nose and everything, all this stuff to keep me alive. And it's dark, and I'm 25 years old, and I think to myself, at 25, you think you're invincible and you've got maybe not have it all figured out, but you think 25, I got my whole life ahead of me, and I'm laying there in the darkness, and I'm just like, this is not what I want to do and what I want to be. And
so what a reality check in that moment, because And for the audience, for context, pancreatitis is very serious. It's one of those things that if you don't catch it on time, it could literally take your life within days, hours, if anything. I actually lost an uncle. My dad's brother died of pancreatitis, and it was a very extreme, sudden onset. It was like Friday, and then Sunday he was, he had already passed. He was in the hospital for those 2 days, and the decline was very, very quick. So from what I understand, it's like a severe inflammation of the pancreas, but enough to where it can kill you. It can take your life. So I don't question at all the severity of what you went through and what an awakening that was for putting everything in context. There's something about touching death, if you will, and like being so close to its door that just kind of shocks you back into life, ironically. So what happened after that?
So I came out of the hospital and now I was sober and had a much better appreciation and respect for our bodies. And I thought, okay, I need to learn how to better take care of this because I've only got one of them, that sobering wake-up call, like you said. So I started to really get passionate about fitness. I've always been an athlete, played sports all my life, but I really wanted to learn how the body worked and why, from a medical perspective, like I don't want to become a doctor, but more from like a fitness perspective and proactive health, taking care of myself before I get back to the hospital. So I gained my passion there, and I went back to playing lacrosse, and I was having the best season of my life because I was lifting now. I was sober. Everything was great. And I tore my knee, and I was like, okay, maybe, that's a sign to call it a career. I'm 26 years old and, going to work with stitches and black eyes and stuff and, just isn't so cute anymore. So I decided, okay, that's my sign to move on. And then I thought, my mom was actually a model. She was a model in the late 70s, early 80s. And we would talk about fashion and stuff like that. And she would explain to me, like, I'd see her old portfolios. And I thought, maybe I'll just try some modeling. I'll go see some agencies in Toronto. And that's how I got my first contract. I went down and saw some agencies and was given a couple contract offers and ended up signing with an agency that I'm Sutherland Models. And I'm still with them to this day from 2008. My modeling, actually, my 15-year modeling anniversary is coming up pretty soon. It's sometime in December, but
it's a way to honor your mom too, her legacy, and just carry that forward as well. That's very nice. I'm sure that you feel some sort of connection with her when you're doing that.
I definitely do. I also have those times where I was like, I wish she could have seen, I wish she could have, because I've taken modeling to the next level. A couple of my family members have modeled, and my mom, obviously, like I said, but I've taken it to a whole different level. But I know that she does see, and I know that she is able to. So yes, it is a wonderful thing to have that and to be able to do that and to follow in her footsteps. And I soon after that got the opportunity to start traveling internationally and to start modeling internationally. And my first contract was South Africa. I went to Cape Town, South Africa. It was absolutely beautiful. The people were extremely friendly, great cost of living. Safe if you're a smart traveler, but if you're not somebody says, hey, come down this dark alley in New York or Dallas or anything, and you walk down there, then you're going to find trouble. But it was an amazing experience. I spent 6 months there. I was supposed to only be there for 3 months, but I knew that wasn't long enough. And then my second trip came home for about 2 weeks, and then I drove to Miami. And so my second trip was in Miami. Which is where you're coming from. And Miami is a wonderful place, and it has so many cities, it has so many different faces. But also, like modeling industry, like any industry, has many different faces. And there are always people who are looking for ways to or wanting to exploit their power over people. And I call them sharks. There are always the sharks who are trying to prey on them. So 2010, I'd been there for 2 days, and I got a call from an agency saying that I had a go-see for a designer. So a go-see, for those who don't know, is it's when you it's basically a casting for specifically you. It's where a designer or a photographer, like, you put out some new pictures or you're new to town, they want to see you. So it's like a private casting, or they'll have a couple people. In this case, it was just a one-on-one. And I'm like, great, I'm just got to Miami. I'm already this is awesome. There were kind of weird things around that. It was at 8:30 at night. It was at the designer's house, and he was a swimwear and underwear designer, which is totally normal because I shoot a lot of body stuff, so that wasn't weird. But my agents did preface it with, he's a bit of a creep. but if he likes you, he'll book you a lot. So I was like, okay. And again, I say this was 2010 because this is before the Me Too movement. And, you know, it was really like the Wild West out there. It really was. So I go to this casting and it's just myself and this gentleman. And, you know, like I said, I'm trying on swimwear. It's not weird for me to just walk into a room and somebody say, hey, can you try the Speedo on? Sure. Yeah, of course. So I went into the bathroom, came back out, tried on a few things, and then went to the bathroom, tried on the next one, came back out. Now he's sitting in a chair and he's like right at like at Speedo level, or he's checking out the fabric. I'm like, there's not that much fabric to check out there, bro. Like, so kind of weird. And then I came out another one and he asked me if I could move my member from one side to another. And that sounds weird to a lot of people, but it's not a weird thing in the industry, because as you're wearing clothing, you don't want to be showing, you know, too much detail. So it's something that you're kind of used to, but I was like, okay, whatever. So I turned around, adjusted, turned back. Okay, cool. Try the next one. And so I go back in, come back out, and he has said, oh, I thought I told you to move it from that side to that side. And he pulled my pants down and he started to grab me. I was absolutely shocked. Yeah. Just absolutely shocked. Like, so for those who know me, they know that I've been in a lot of physical altercations in my life. And, you know, there was like young Jonathan who was just, you know, looking for bar fights, you know, whatever. After my mom passed away, where I had a lot of misplaced anger and I was, you know, looking for confrontations. There's also lacrosse, where it's a very physical sport. There's a lot of fighting in lacrosse, and I was always one to stick up for myself or my teammates. And I have no problem with confrontation or handling myself physically. And I say that because here I am. I'm a 220-pound guy who's been in many fights, and I'm frozen. And this guy's doing this, and I push him back, and you know, I say, you know, don't touch me. And I think, first of all, I'm like, okay, now I'm going to beat him to death. And then I think to myself, okay, I can't do that because I'll get charged with attempted murder or whatever. And I just said, you know what? I need to get out of here. I need to get out of the situation. I said, you know what? I don't want to work with you ever again. Like, I don't want to work with you. I don't want to see you ever again. Got out of there. But when I left there, I didn't tell my agency because of the times. And a lot of times back then, if things got around that you had kind of, so if you had, say, like gone back to your agency and gotten that person in trouble, you could get passed on, like it could get to another photographer or a friend of theirs, like a designer, and then you'd be labeled a troublemaker and you'd be blacklisted. So I just got into Miami, but not to mention though, I was angry, I was upset, I was confused, I was depressed, I was all those things you could imagine. I was feeling all those things. So I just internalized it. And I had been sober. It was about 4 years from that point. And I was still sober, but I'll go back a little bit. When I was in Cape Town, I noticed that I was starting to compare myself physically to other people because I'm a larger framed person. I carry a certain amount of muscle, whatever. It's my frame. You know, we're all built differently. And when I first saw these guys like on the covers of Men's Health and all these stuff that I was going to be shooting for or wanting to do, they all look like they're big and jacked. And I realized I got there and I was like, I'm like twice the size of these guys. And I started to plant this seed of like body dysmorphia, you know, like even though I was working a lot and did really well, I was starting to think like, yeah, I got this job, but why did he get that job? Maybe if I looked more like them. And so after that happened in Miami, and with this planted seed of body dysmorphia, within 2 weeks, I started an 8-year battle with an eating disorder. And that was part of my ability to release, I guess you would say. Like, I was what we'd say, what I call, I've never heard it before, but I think I was a functioning bulimic because I would go through my day. I'd have my healthy breakfast, lunch, dinner, everything fine. And then again, it was when I was alone in those four walls and I needed some kind of release, I would get like $100 worth of junk food, eat, and then regret it and then purge it up. And I stopped lifting weights. I started running and just very much changed my body. But yeah, that was a struggle for quite a while.
That is quite a story. And you can see how it's the ripple effect, right? So one thing amplifies the next, and you have all of these layers that later on become complex symptoms. And I don't know if you know who Gabor Mate is, Dr. Gabor Mate. He wrote The Myth of Normal and other amazing books, but he says, don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain, right? So a lot of this is just what I'm hearing from you is so much of this is the element of self-soothing and numbing and trying to soothe the pain of that dissonance between this just happened and what am I supposed to do? And did it just happen? And I'm also dealing with everything else you spoke about before, the loss of your mother and the grief and things that feel very dissonant. Maybe somebody looks at you from the outside and they look at you and they think, oh, this guy's fine. Like nothing's wrong with him. Look at him. He has an amazing career. He's doing this, he's doing that. But inside you feel so different. And so that discrepancy is the space that creates room for a lot of these addictions or eating disorders or all of these other things you mentioned. So thank you for sharing that. I also know that I meet with a lot of people very vulnerably, and I am hearing, which I think is a good thing, I'm hearing more men come forth with their stories and the stories about sexual abuse by men in power. Meaning, and when I say men in power, I mean somebody who holds a certain type of power over another person, like a boss or money or influence. And it is not uncommon, I'm learning, for men to take advantage, especially of younger men, in different industries. So it sounds very much like what you experienced. First of all, I'm sorry for that experience. It also sounds like you have done your inner work following all of that to get to the amazing person that's sitting here in front of me today. So continue with your story, please.
Sure. No, I appreciate you saying that. Yes. And it's so many different careers, and it's just not just modeling, obviously. It's anybody, like you said, who holds any kind of power over somebody. But I think it's an important thing to talk about. Within the last calendar year, I thought I was going to take the sexual assault and the eating disorder to my grave. I thought those two things were off the table. Close friends, therapists, like you name it, didn't tell anybody that kind of stuff. And only within the last 12 months that I've started to really learn forgiveness. I still have a lot to go with regards to addiction and stuff like that, but I'll say this now because it's pertinent. I've come to realize that all the time that I spent as an alcoholic, as a drug addict, an eating disorder, all the decisions that I made that were not the right decision at the time, I forgive myself for. Because you know what? I was doing the best that I could at the time. I was trying. I was really trying. I wasn't making best, but you know what? I learned and thankfully made it through them. I shouldn't have made through, many times, but thankfully I have. But also, I forgive myself for the other things like my mom passing away or the sexual assault, because I didn't bring those things upon myself, but they happened. And it's okay that they happened, because I wouldn't be the person that I am today if they hadn't happened. And I'm very happy with the person that I am today. And I wouldn't change my path. It wouldn't change my, the last 20 years of my life, because it's what I needed to do to become the person I am today. So yeah, that's a big thing to me. And I think it's, like you said, it's also very important for men to speak up about this, because I didn't think I thought those were going to the grave with me because they were not manly things. I've been in many fights, can bench press 300 and something pounds, but eating disorder and you're sexually assaulted, that's not man. Well, no, it doesn't make me less of a man. It doesn't make me anything. Yeah, that happened. And it happened to me, and okay, I've learned from it and got forward. So I just wanted to say that. So I'm struggling with the eating disorder. I'm still traveling around quite a bit, and I end up moving back to Toronto and deciding, because traveling constantly for modeling, it's very exciting. It's a lot of fun, but it also starts to weigh on you, and being away from my father, being away from family. And every time you come back home, everybody's lives had to continue. You have to kind of play catch up. I was, very passionate about fitness, as I still am. I wanted to start a fitness business. I wanted to get a dog and not be like, okay, I'm going away for 6 months now, really, put roots back down. So I moved back, and I got back into the habit of smoking marijuana. And I smoked in college a bit, again, probably too much, but I shut it off for a while because drinking was much more important to me than smoking weed was. And whenever I would get drunk, if somebody would be like, here, hit this, it would just ruin my night. And I wouldn't be able to function. I couldn't function. But so I started with that. And that was a serious addiction that I dealt with for quite a while, probably 7 years. And, I know people say, oh, it's just weed. You can't get addicted to weed. And it's like, you absolutely can, because I couldn't function without it. And again, the same routine that I had been doing. I'd go to train my clients in the morning. I'd go to a shoot. I'd go to the gym. I'd do whatever, and I'd come home and the anxiety would build. And it would be like, oh no, I can't be alone in these four walls. And it would be just smoking ridiculous amounts. I like so much that I was embarrassed. I'd go to different dealers to buy because I was embarrassed by how much weed I was buying and smoking by myself. And it was ruining, again, me financially. My personality was changing. It was exacerbating the bulimia because with smoking weed comes munchies. And with munchies comes the regret and then the purge. And, it's very cyclical. But it started, and I'm a really big believer in like the universe gives you signs. Like pancreatitis was a big, huge, massive stop sign. And same with marijuana, like it started to turn on me. And instead of being like a place where I could just sit back and chill and, watch a movie and just munch or whatever, it started to be a place of discomfort and panic. And, I started thinking about all the things that I should be doing for my business, as opposed to just enjoying the fact that I'm sitting here like stoned and baked, hanging out. So I realized pretty quickly, I don't like that feeling. Well, not pretty quickly. I realized, and plus I had tried for years to quit. I had so many, this is the last time down the toilet flush. And, 2 days later, I'm like, okay, well, maybe just I'll grab a little more. And it just finally got to a point, like I said, where it became, it wasn't worth it because it was just adding too much panic and too much stress to my life.
Right.
But I was also doing nitrous oxide, which is like inhaling nitrous oxide, and taking Adderall and abusing both of those in vast quantities. I'd be up 3 or 4 days at a time, just constantly. I'd be locked in my apartment, turn my phone off. I would be completely disconnected from society. Right. And I've talked about recently on my Instagram, but I talk about a lot the constant reset that I was doing. Coming out of those binges, and same with alcohol, same with whatever, coming out of those binges, so say like a 3-day binge, I stopped taking it. Well, it takes my body another 2 days to get it out of its system, start feeling normal again. So then I haven't gone to the gym for 5 days. And now I'm trying to get back to the gym, but I'm not feeling as strong as I was. So I'm doing that reset, but I'm not resetting from zero. Every time it was kind of just putting me back a notch and putting me back a notch and just, always doing that. So again, I had those breaking points with Adderall and with nitrous, and I broke down. I've hit dozens of rock bottoms, and I just found the strength to get rid of them and finally know that these things are not helping my quality of life. They're the perceived idea of they make me happy, and then I would make a list of like what actually makes me happy. And that's like spending time with my friends and going to the gym on a regular basis and walking my dog and, being relied upon and knowing that, being somebody that people know that they can rely on. And what do I think makes me happy? Getting high, doing drugs, sitting in my house for 4 days, those kinds of things. But the last one that I had, because every time I quit an addiction, all of these nicely compartmentalized little boxes of trauma that I've just stuffed away would start to close in on me. So I had an addiction to some over-the-counter back pills, and I had taken them for years just, because I'd have aches and pains from lacrosse or working out and stuff. And each pill contained 200 milligrams of ibuprofen and 500 milligrams of methocarbamol, which is the active muscle releaser. And I didn't have anything else except for these pills. So, it says don't take more than 12 in a day. So I, took 12 and then took 20 and then took 30. And I got up to taking 100 pills every single day. I was taking 50,000 milligrams of methocarbamol and 20,000 milligrams of ibuprofen every single day. I'd buy a bottle of 100. I'd go home. I'd just dump a handful, like 30 in there, swallow it. I'd either get really high or pass out, wake up, dump some more every single day. And I didn't know what was happening to me because all I knew that was I was losing weight rapidly. I had no drive, like no motivation. I had no strength. I was getting very lightheaded and having like fainting spells. And my anxiety was through the roof because I was thinking, okay, I'm going to be driving and I'm going to faint and take somebody out or something, God forbid. And I got to the point where I realized that it was these pills. And I was doing this for months and months, and I was at a shoot, and every time I jumped off of a truck, we were shooting like on top of a truck. And then every time we jump off and, between shots, I felt like I was going to collapse. I went home that night and I was like, okay, I'm not buying these pills tonight, because it's so obvious when you're in addiction what the reason is for all this turmoil in your life. It's right there in front of you, but you do everything possible not to look at it or not to recognize it. Not to it's right there. It's right. The alcohol's right there. The weed's right there. The pills, everything's right there. But it's like, oh, I probably just need more carbs. I didn't get enough sleep last night. I've got a lot of stress going on. You find so many excuses. And I finally was just like, okay, this is the thing. So I didn't take it that night. And then the next morning I was getting ready to go to another shoot. And I remember I was brushing my teeth and my legs were buckling. Like I couldn't hold my own weight as I'm, brushing my teeth in the mirror. And I called my agency. I was like, look, I have to go to the hospital. And what had happened is I had a intestinal ulcer from all of these pills I was taking, because they were just eating me up. And I didn't know, because I wasn't seeing any blood. I wasn't passing blood in my stool or my urine, and I didn't see any blood. It was just leaking into my body cavity. But I had major arterial bleeding, and that was my real okay, enough is enough.
How old were you when that happened?
So I was 35 at the time. 35. And I was like, okay, I'm 35 years old. I've spent 14 years doing this. And my plan, it hasn't worked. And I need to do something drastic. And I give myself credit to some extent, because I stayed with baseline drugs mostly, like marijuana, over-the-counter back pills. I knew the moment I took a oxy whatever or a hydro whatever they're called, my life as I knew it was going to be over.
Sure.
Adderall's pretty aggressive, but I knew that I was either going to graduate to the next level and go harder, or I had to do something. And I had that feeling that you said so much, where people would look at me and they would look and say, oh, there's Jonathan, the international model. He's always got beautiful women around him, and he's got it all figured out. And on the inside, I felt empty. I felt broken. I felt like an absolute fraud. I didn't feel like any of that, because I had focused so many years on my body and working my body and taking care of my body, even though I was doing things like having 3,500 milligrams of caffeine every day, to go to the gym longer so I could take care of my body even better. And I'm like, I'm very much an all or none kind of person. But I realized that, okay, you're 35 and you're not living the life that you should be living, and you're barely surviving. You're not thriving. You're barely surviving. And that's when I finally said, okay, enough of the stigma that therapy's for wimps and it's not manly to go to therapy, and I don't have the money. I always had money for drugs and alcohol. I don't have the time. I always had time for that. Enough is enough. I have to do something. And that's when things got really hard, because I had to learn at 35 for the first time in my life to be a sober, functioning adult. And I had never been that. Because even when I was sober after my mom passed away, I was working out excessively. And looking in hindsight, there were things that I was doing with an addictive mindset, or an addictive, pattern, or just way of doing them, where I was using them as a distraction. And sure. Even traveling was a distraction. Traveling, I was never able to just sit down and deal with my thoughts. I'd be like, oh, I'll go back to the gym for another 3 hours. So I had to learn. And like I said, it got really hard, because all those boxes that I had, neatly packed away, and they all started coming in, and I started opening up the boxes in therapy, and I didn't have a substance to fall back on. And I worked with a wonderful therapist and started going weekly, and as I got better, I started to learn tools to be able to navigate these things. But it was a big learning process, and that's really, really how I got through and got to the end of my addictions, and then finally kicked the bulimia as well, and had to learn at 35.
I want to appreciate how much of a miracle it is that you're here with us. First of all, when you said, you got up to 100 and you also had the pancreatitis, but you also had the ulcer. These are things that, man, we really don't know when it's our time. Obviously, if we're given all these chances, I feel like you realize the power of that, right? And you said, it's time for me to do something different. And it doesn't matter the age. There's all these imposed, like by 35, you should have done X, Y, Z or whatever. But I'm a firm believer that, gosh, everybody has their own path, right? And it could be 35, 40, I don't, 12, whatever. It's just whenever you have that aha moment that there has to be more than this, right? Like there just has to be more than this. That's when you should just take it and run. And it seems like you've done that and then some. Your story is very powerful. I didn't want to interrupt you because you're like on this beautiful role of just sharing everything, but I do want to go back to a few things. So one is the stigma around men talking about this. I want to offer with what I said earlier that there are more men openly talking about these things. People underestimate how often it happens in terms of one, what happened in Miami, and then number two, how often men tend to soothe their nervous system in terms of substance use or take anger and translate that to substance use because it's the whole numbing factor, right? I never blame the person for doing that because at the end of the day, who wants pain? Nobody wants pain.
No.
But I feel like your story is so powerful because it wasn't just one thing. It was all these elements, combination of losses, being able to transmute all of that into something very powerful and harnessing the power of therapy. Therapy is a layered term for a lot of people, men and women. And I feel like people misunderstand it. So if you could just tell the listeners, like, what have you found to be so different about being able to use therapy, regaining the reins to your life? So what I mean by that is a lot of people think therapy is like a taboo thing or like, that's not for me, or like, that's for people who have like real problems or whatever. But I would argue everybody needs therapy at some point in their life. And I'll follow that with, I saw a post today about how to choose a good therapist, because that's a whole other thing in and of itself.
Absolutely. I think when I was going through my stuff and going through whatever, like we said, I was very insular and kept a lot to myself, but I would talk to my friends sometimes and I would talk to my family, but they had their own bias or they were part of the story in some way. So going to a therapist helped me see situations or things that have happened to me or I've done in a very non-biased third-party way where they are not part of the narrative. My family or, other people are. But also, you're speaking to somebody who's educated and who's had years of practice with this and is coming from an educated background. And they really just have your best interest in mind. And I think the style, like you said, the post that I just put up recently is making sure that you find a therapist that connects with you. I was terrified going to therapy because I was like, okay, I have to talk about all of the worst stuff right away. And I found what works best for me, and the two therapists that I've had, the one in Canada and the one that I have now, they're very much just, so where do you want to start? And if I glaze over something and it's not time to talk about it, then they don't harp on it and be like, hey, let's go back to that really traumatic thing that you glazed over and you don't want to talk about. They'll just let me kind of naturally go on with it. And then I'll come back to it at my own pace and we'll talk about it. And like you said, it's a incredibly powerful tool to have at our disposal. And a lot of people don't have access to that. And I understand that. And I appreciate that. And I feel for those people. And if you do have it, I think, like you said, everybody needs therapy at some point in their life. Therapy to me has been learning tools. I didn't want to go to a therapist to rely on somebody to make all of my life decisions for me. I'm not that kind of a person. I wanted to learn the tools so that when I encounter these things, I wasn't reaching for medication, although I do take a daily medication. I believe that there's definitely a place for that if you're that kind of person. So I'm not stigmatizing or saying anything negative about that. But I didn't want to have to rush to somebody to help me solve my problems. I wanted the tools to be able to navigate my way through life and feel life's ups and downs. And I have a silly story, but it's true. Like, so when I first started going to therapy, I was going back to the gym regularly, and every day after the gym, I'd come back and I'd go to the grocery store and I'd get the soup of the day and I'd get a little thing of sushi. And I would do that every day. And a couple weeks down the line, I went to my therapist and I was like, I think I have a new addiction. She's like, oh no, what happened? I was like, every day after the gym, I find myself going right to the grocery store and I go get soup and I go get sushi. I'm like, am I addicted to this? And she's like, no. But it's sad, but it's funny at the same time. I mean, at 35 years old, I had to learn that there's a difference between a routine. And she's like, no, Jonathan, but it was the same mentality of whenever I finished my day, I had to go get my vice and make sure that I had my vice. And this was just a nice routine of I worked hard and this is just a lot easier than cooking something. I'm going to grab soup and sushi. But I had to learn those things at 35 and learn balance. I genetically am predisposed to addiction. It runs in my family on my mother's side. I have to watch for that. And I play hockey. I love playing hockey. It's part of my therapy for me because it's, for me, the moment I'm most present in my life. Because if you're out there during the game and you're thinking about your taxes, everybody's skating by you and you're just not playing. So I'm very present. I love hockey. I'm from Canada. So I play hockey 4 times a week and I go to the gym 6 days a week and I was running 6 miles every day. I was like, oh, wait a minute. That's a bit too much. That's the addictive part of Jonathan. That's doing too much. We need to drop the 6 miles a day because your knees are hurting, and keeping myself in check and with that balance. So I think that's a long-winded way of saying that for me, therapy has been incredible. It's an incredible way to learn tools and to learn balance and to have somebody who's educated, non-biased, third party, who is there for no other reason except to help you and help you in whatever way that you need help.
Knowing that balance is something that I would actually say a few people understand, whether they have some type of a life-threatening dependency on a substance or not. Because at the end of the day, every behavior has that duality to it. And what some people call passion could borderline obsession or addiction. So it's all on how we frame things and where is that line for each person. Each person has a different threshold and each person has a different thing that they're focused on. So a lot of times, very intense personality, like you said, you probably are a very high achiever, in many areas when in your fitness, in your sport, in hockey, and that also has that double-edged sword element to it. And I appreciate you saying that because it's an important reflection that I invite everybody to do a bit of self-analysis on, because it's not just people. We're talking specifically with the example of addiction here, but we all have that in us. We all have that thing, that one behavior that maybe takes over us more than others. And what that is in your life could be different things. I would argue that a big common one is social media. I would argue that people spend way too much time on social media, and you would argue, oh, but that's not as damaging. It is. You've seen rates of suicidality increase. You've seen rates of, with the kids, it's the bullying. So anyway, I don't want to go down that path, but my point is that this self-evaluation that obviously you did, because at 35, you were trying to identify the fact that I go every day to get my sushi. Is this an addiction or is this normal? Right? What is normal? And, but I invite everybody to do a little bit of that self-analysis within themselves. It's in all of us, essentially.
Absolutely. And that's why I always say too, sorry to cut you off, and I'm not a preachy non-drinker or sober. I'm not preachy. I think everybody should do as they please. And by all means, live your life and live your life however you want to live it. I just say that, be careful of when that want turns into a need. And when it's hey, I got the big promotion. Let's go out and celebrate. Oh, I didn't get the promotion. Let's go out and have a drink and, calm your nerves. It's Christmas. Let's get together. It's a day that ends in Y. Let's get drunk. And throughout these things too, and I just bring this up because of the nature of your podcast. Like you mentioned in the intro, I lost three people that I called my best friends at one time throughout those years. The first year after I started modeling, my friend committed suicide. And probably 5 years after that, I lost a friend in a car accident. And just last July, I lost a friend to an undiagnosed heart condition. And those things, grief and loss, obviously, it's awful. And I think about them every day. I think of my mom every day. But I've now made it my mission with my new way of thinking that I'm going to live my life to the fullest for them and in honor of them, because they were taken away very suddenly, too soon. And I miss them every day, and I think about them every day, and I would give anything for, just 5 more minutes. I have to live my life that much harder and that much better. And within balance, of course, so within reason, like we're talking about, but to really live and appreciate life, because like we started out the conversation with, we really don't know when we have that last day or what that's going to be. And that's been a very important shift for me. It's like, I can sit here and I can wallow and I can be an alcoholic, but that's not what my mom would want for me. That's not, what my friends would want for like me. And I'm wasting this beautiful opportunity that I have called life. For me, that's being sober. But again, I'm not a preachy non-drinker, and I just wanted to mention those things because they're very important people to me, and they had a big impact on how I see life and how I see death and how I see living my own life.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm deeply sorry about those losses. Those are all complex losses. I honor you when you say that you want to live just that much more for them. I feel like that's an element of grief and loss that's important, at least to me, that I always say like, hey, I want to have this experience, where before I would have probably hesitated, like, should I not? Now I'm just like, I don't even question it. I say, let's go, let's go, let's do this. And a part of me just prays and hopes that somehow my brother gets to see it through my experience as well. So I hear you loud and clear. And I really admire how you've opened up. Like you said, maybe a year ago, this conversation would have never happened, or maybe 2 years ago, this conversation would have never happened. So I honor your bravery. I honor your journey. I thank you profoundly for sharing it, because I know for a fact it is much needed, not just in the grief space, but in society. I feel like there's a lot of people who haven't addressed the things that they need to address personally, walking around throwing their traumas and pain at each other and at themselves. And it takes a lot of work to get to a place, for all of us. It takes a lot of work to get to a place where we can say, you know what, this is just part of being human. There's no shame in any of this. So I thank you so much. Is there anything you want to share with our audience in terms of what you're working on? You're talking more openly about this. So are there any projects in the pipeline, or is there anything you want the audience to know?
So I'm just getting started with the public speaking side, because like you said, this is a very new thing for me. Right now, the biggest thing is getting my story out there, and, with the help of, gracious people like yourself, and being able to have these conversations to get it out there and to shed the light and shed the years of shame and browbeating of myself that I was doing. That's the biggest thing. And public speaking, I actually have a call tomorrow to start talking about booking some dates. I'm still very passionate about fitness. I'm training people online quite a bit, and modeling is still a great passion of mine. And so is real estate. Real estate market's not great right now, but so is real estate. It's a new challenge, and I'm enjoying that. This is this is a very wonderful thing, and it's very cathartic for myself as well. I'm happy to share, because I don't think I have it all figured out. Definitely not. I want to talk about things that I've been through, and maybe some of the things people can relate to, or you can take it as a do not do this. Save yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars and 15, 20 years of your life. But no, those are things, like you said, I'm working on and really just working at continuing that balance and keeping that self-awareness of that balance, and knowing that, that's who I am and that's who I'll always be. And it's my best asset and one of my worst assets, because it takes me to places like becoming a professional athlete, and then it takes me to becoming an alcoholic. But hey, that's just it. We're all human. Yeah, exactly.
You have to be somebody who has it all the way together. And I know enough to know that even people who look like they have it together often do not. Yes, so I honor, whenever somebody speaks their truth openly. Being human is messy. It goes up and down. It's not linear. So I appreciate when somebody opens up and shares their story. I honor all of that. What do you rely on to keep you grounded? Obviously, I know therapy. Obviously, I know your health and fitness and your will to honor your loved ones who have passed through your life. I get that. What keeps you grounded?
That's a great question. Fitness is one of the things that really keeps me grounded, because for me to be baseline, for me to be like, I need to be physically active every day. And of course I'll have rest days, but also leaning on and nurturing friendships with my best friends, and with all the traveling that I've done around the world and all the moving. I have a very small circle of people that I consider my closest friends. And my father, of course, he's still with me and with us and very close to me. And for the longest time, I would just have fleeting friendships where I wouldn't nurture them. I would just I'd be in that city and I'd have an intense friendship. We'd hang out every day and then I'd move on to the next and I wouldn't nurture that. So having that and leaning on those people and being around people like myself who are direct and to the point. And I don't go out there looking to hurt people's feelings, whatever. But if friends come to me and they want to know my opinion or they want, and vice versa, it's like, tell it to me straight. I don't need to just tell me that I'm doing great and it's all sunshine and roses. Keep me straight. So, and also knowing the fact that I cannot dabble in any kind of substance. I can't. I can be around people who are drinking. That's fine because alcohol's in their cup. I have no desire to put it to my lips or anything like that. But if there's weed smoke around and stuff like that, like I don't want to catch a secondhand buzz because my brain, that moment that something feels good and I like it, my brain will go, oh, that felt good. We're going to do that a lot. And it will just start and I will pick up right where I left off. So being very aware of that, I cannot put things in my body and I can't even dabble with. And, people are like, hey, have you thought about microdosing mushrooms? I'm like, have you heard my story? Like, it won't be a microdose. It'll be a macro. It'll be all the time. So that's another thing too, is being very aware that I can't put myself in those situations and or even dabble with.
Well, that awareness is so key, and it's a collection of actions. I also heard you say the fitness part of it was a part of your life before all of this, but for the listeners, in grief, in mental health, and all of these topics that we were talking about, it's also a very physical experience, and people underestimate how much of mental health and experiencing grief is through the body. And I learned that the hard way, because one of the things that shocked me in grief that honestly freaked me out because I didn't know what was happening was how physical it was. I have to at least go on a walk, like at the bare minimum all the time, just to be able to breathe outside air, get vitamin D, like look at something different. And that's just the body needing to do its thing to be able to maintain. So I hear you on so many levels. Where can people find more information about you, whether they want to work with you on the public speaking side, hear your story, the modeling side, the real estate side, all the things? Where can they reach you?
Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. It's just my name, Jonathan Niziol, Niziol. On Facebook and my website are Jonathan Niziol Official. On my Instagram, I have a link that has a lot of the stuff that I've done, but also got all my contact information. So it's all there. We're all very connected these days. Yeah, just all the usual places. But I love that. I love having these conversations with people like yourself, where you can take something and I've learned things and have things now that I can put in my arsenal to go forward and for my own life and continuing the conversation. And I always say too that talking about your grief or whatever is maybe it's not necessarily for everybody to go on a podcast and do that and talk about it publicly. And I get that and I totally respect that. But, some of the conversations I've had in private and people who reached out in my direct messages, people I've known for a long time or whatever, it's wonderful because I've learned and continue to learn, and we just keep working together the same way that you and I are sitting here today. So I love to hear from people. And I love to keep learning from people because I do not have it all figured out. And that's for sure.
I hear you. I've yet to meet that person that has it all figured out.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's very true. I feel like all of these experiences strip you down to the core. I don't know if you can hear my dog's footsteps in the background. Sorry about that.
Yep. It's time for a nail trim.
He's getting restless. But all of these experiences strip you down to the core. And at least for me, I can only speak for myself, but it makes me want to connect with people on a more authentic level. No, I don't want to meet your representative. I want to meet you. I want to meet your soul. I want to meet your heart. I want to meet the things the part of you that make you human. And all of these conversations help bring more of that to the world. They're very important. So again, thank you so much. My final question is, what would Jonathan today tell 21-year-old Jonathan?
So I would have just lost my mom. And I would say to myself, look, it's going to be hard. It's going to be bleak and it's going to take a long time, but stick with it because you are going to be okay. You are going to get through this. And people ask me like, oh, you wouldn't say like, don't drink and don't do drugs. No, I would say, look, it's going to be all those things, but stick with it because at so many times throughout my life, I never thought that I would make it through. And I never thought that I would be my version of normal or living some kind of a balanced life. And I would tell myself, hey, listen, it's going to be hard. you've got this. Just keep fighting and do not give up, because it will be okay and you will get through this.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I will link all of his information in the show notes. It has been an honor and a pleasure speaking with you today. I respect everything that you're doing, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
You as well. Thank you very much.
That's it for today's episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Grief and Light podcast. I'd also love to connect with you and hear your thoughts and your stories. Feel free to share them with me via my Instagram page at Grief and Light, or you can also visit griefandlight.com for more information and updates. Thank you so much for being here, for being you, and always remember, you are not alone.